All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee hearing today. We have 4 agencies that we're going to hear from. We are going to start with the State Police, and we are going to begin with our analysis by Madeline Miller.
Good afternoon. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the analysis for the Department of State Police. In fiscal 2024, the budget increases by less than 1% compared with compared with fiscal 2022, the working appropriation has grown by $61.5 million, largely attributable to salary enhancements and the addition of positions through deficiencies. The analysis begins with a review of some managing for results data on page 3. As a full-service law enforcement agency, traffic enforcement remains a chief responsibility of the Department of State Police. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows the rate of traffic fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. Though travel decreased during the pandemic, the number of fatalities rose. In 2021, vehicle miles traveled rose 11.9% and fatalities fell 1.7%, but neither returned to their pre-pandemic levels. In calendar 2022, the number of traffic fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled is expected to decrease further. On page 5, Exhibit 2 details the number of arrests by the Department of State Police and other law enforcement agencies, along with the number of impairment-related fatal collisions per 100 million VMT. The rate of impairment-related fatal collisions continued to grow in 2021 to 0.33 and is expected to rise to 0.34 in 2022. This suggests that there are more impairment-related fatal collisions than there were prior to the pandemic. In calendar 2021, DUI arrests rose 5.8% as DUI arrests by state police and other law enforcement agencies grew 7.3% and 5.1% respectively. The second piece of performance analysis begins on page 6. Due to changes in the definition of domestically related crimes over time and the state not having a distinct crime of domestic violence, the annual MFR submission includes data on domestically related crimes. Exhibit 3 shows that reported domestically related crimes fell during the pandemic. This data might suggest that crimes against people eligible for relief in Maryland fell, but it is also possible that additional crimes may have been committed and that fewer were reported than would have otherwise been due to actions taken as part of the pandemic response. I bring this up to say that while much of this analysis focuses on crime data, reported crime statistics are not able to capture the complete picture of crime in the state. The third piece of performance analysis begins on page 7, and the exhibit for it is on page 8. One of the department's objectives in achieving an efficient and effective workforce that allows it to meet other strategic goals is to recruit trooper applicants capable and willing to complete the high-intensity entry-level training program. The department has experienced a significant decrease in the number of qualified applicants since calendar 2020. In calendar 2021, the number of applicants declined 64.9% compared with the first class of calendar 2020. Applicants must meet additional qualifications, and eventual class sizes are much lower than the number of applications. However, the average class size for the 8 applicant rounds described earlier in the analysis is 42. Next, I'll turn to discussion of the budget, beginning with fiscal 2022. In fiscal 22 closeout, the department reverted or canceled $20.6 million across all fund types, including $3.9 million in general funds, $10.7 million in special funds, and $3.4 million in federal funds. The reversion of general funds is primarily due to vacancies, and a portion of the special funds that were reverted are also due to vacancies. Remaining special funds were canceled due to insufficient funding within the Speed Monitoring Systems Fund, which will be discussed a little bit further later in the analysis. Turning now to fiscal 2023, I highlight some of the legislative priorities set in Supplemental Budget number 5 of 2022. $3.4 million was provided for the State Police Gun Center in this in that supplemental budget, and $5 million was added to provide grants to police departments to acquire license plate readers. The department reports that it has approved plans to award $4.7 million for mobile license plate reader systems, flexible use systems, and fixed site systems. This grant is not continued in fiscal 2024. In the proposed deficiencies section, later on down on that page, the second item is that 3.4 in special funds. So the supplemental budget added special funds to the department's budget. This action taken in the deficiency adds 19 positions to support the gun center. There are another two deficiencies which were added. $3.8 million in special fund expenditure is removed from the Field Operations Bureau and is instead placed in the Support Services Bureau. This is effectually a fund swap to support the purchase of replacement vehicles, equipment, and in-car radios. Then $5.4 million in general funds are provided to add 22 positions for the licensing division, and this will also be discussed later. The overview of fiscal 2024 spending can be found on page 10 in Exhibit 5. The total allowance is $561.5 million, with personnel costs representing about 83% of expenditures throughout the department. Then I'll jump then to Exhibit 6, which starts on page 11 and goes on to page 12. The fiscal 24 allowance increases by $3.8 million above the current year appropriation, after accounting for the $12.6 million in fiscal 23 deficiency appropriations. The main drivers of this growth include the annualization of November 2022, the November 22 COLA. Other significant changes include increases in gas and oil expenditure, which is expected to rise $2.5 million. And then there's the removal of one-time funding provided for offsite data storage for the Criminal Intelligence Center, and the removal of license plate reader funds, which were provided in the supplemental budget of last session. Page 13 has exhibit number 7, which explains a little bit more about what's going on with vehicle expenses for the department and for the Speed Monitoring Systems Fund. Under the Automated Speed Camera Program, State Police receives speed camera special fund revenues to support the program's operations and to fund the acquisition of replacement vehicles for its fleet, along with other costs to support the fleet vehicle maintenance. The funds appear in the agency's budget as expenditures supported through the Speed Monitoring Systems Fund. The fiscal 24 allowance provides $8.1 million in total funds to purchase vehicles, including $3.2 million in special funds from the Speed Monitoring Systems Fund. Over time, the Speed Monitoring Systems Fund has not been able to account for the full costs of vehicles to the department. Then there's a discussion of the Maryland State Police Gun Center on page 14. Chapter 142 established the Gun Center and necessitates the addition of 19 positions, including 4 sworn. Though there was an existing gun center in the department, it was a voluntary resource that handled approximately 9,900 calls for service in calendar 2021. Now that law enforcement agencies must report information to the center, the demand for its use has increased, and calls for service are expected to more than double in fiscal 2023. Discussion of Vehicle Theft Prevention Council costs is at the bottom of page 14. Funding for this grant program increases in the allowance from $1.9 million in fiscal 23 to $3.1 million in fiscal 2024. The Vehicle Theft Prevention Council, to the extent possible, allocates grants among the subdivisions of the state on a pro rata basis, determined by the total number of vehicles registered in each subdivision divided by the total number of vehicles registered in the state. A 2021 program evaluation by the Department of Legislative Services found that Maryland jurisdictions receiving the bulk of direct VTPC funding have experienced a greater decrease in the vehicle theft rate than jurisdictions that did not receive direct funding. Appendix 3 of this document provides a summary of recent grant awards from the VTPC by jurisdiction, and DLS asks that the department comment on how VTPC uses crime statistics in order to target funds to areas experiencing high rates of car thefts, and for this year, how they will use it to target areas experiencing high rates of carjackings. Personnel data for the department is provided on page 15, and the discussion of this data continues in the following pages. Most of the change occurs in the working appropriation rather than in the allowance, so the growth to the allowance is only 5 regular positions. Those 5 positions were going to be added for the Office of the State Fire Marshal. It'll be 5 Safety Inspector 1 positions, and these are required to keep pace with the increasing demand for inspecting fire exits and reasonable safety standards. Then some information about vacancies is provided on page 16 in Exhibit 8. Between fiscal 2017 and 2020, the department operated with an average of 10.4% of its sworn and civilian positions vacant. The changes in the vacancy rates for sworn and civilian personnel are shown below. While the vacancy rate for sworn positions decreased to 9.2% in fiscal 22, and it is estimated to fall further to 8.8% in fiscal 2023, vacancies among civilian positions continue to rise, reaching 16.5% in fiscal 2022 and 20% in fiscal 23. DLS asks that the department comment on its efforts it's taking to retain and recruit for civilian positions. Overall vacancies in the fiscal 21 through 2023 calendar years are shown in Exhibit 9. As of January 2023, the department had 283 vacant positions. This reflects a decrease from a year ago when the vacancy rate was approximately 13.1%. The department's turnover rate is currently budgeted at a lower level than the vacancy rate in order to, or this means that even though the department expects the funding for all regular positions for the full year in fiscal 23 would cost $483 million, the working appropriation only contains $457 million. Given that vacancies so far only decreased modestly, the $457 million figure is likely more than the agency will need. DLS estimates that it's an overestimation of about $18.9 million. However, general funds would be reassigned to other purposes that the department may need funding for in closeout, such as overtime expenses, which might be higher given the higher vacancy rate. A discussion of issues begins on page 18 with crime rates and NIBRS adoption. So the department is responsible for collecting crime data from local law enforcement agencies and compiling that information into the Maryland's Uniform Crime Report. The most recent publication of this report is the 2020 volume. The 2021 publication has been delayed. DLS recommends adding annual budget language restricting funds pending the submission of the 2022 UCR, and this recommended language is provided on page 26. The difficulty in publishing the newest iteration is related to the NIBRS transition, which is the nationwide effort led by the FBI to change how law enforcement agencies report crime data. Previously, it was reported under a system known as SRS, or summary data, and now it will be moving to certified data, which collects information to a higher degree of detail for each type of crime or each crime incident. To collect information from non-compliant contributors at the local agency level, state police developed a dashboard tool for contributors to manually input their records. This data collection process is slow, however, and means that the 2021 federal estimates for crime in the United States use data from Maryland agencies that represent half of the state's total population. Though the 2021 UCR is not yet complete and most crime statistics data are not yet available, the agency's MFR did include a description of or information on Part 1 offenses per 100,000 people in Maryland, This is shown in Exhibit 10 of the document on page 19. The rate of Part 1 offenses in Maryland has decreased 45.4% over the last decade, from 3,226 in 2012 to 1,762 in 2021. DLS asked that the department comment on the operational difficulties it faces due to the delay in the 2021 UCR publication, and what actions, if any, it can take to prevent the 2022 UCR publication from being similarly delayed. The second issue starts at the bottom of page 19. The licensing division within the department administers provisions of state law and regulations related to the licensing and registration of firearms, handgun permits, security guards, and other licensing functions. A Supreme Court case from June 2022 had a substantial impact on the division's caseloads. Governor Hogan in July directed the department to suspend the state's good and substantial reason standard for possessing a handgun wear and carry permit following the decision from the Supreme Court. Though this did not change any other aspect of the review process for the licensing division, the number of applications for handgun permits increased dramatically in 2022, as shown in Exhibit 11 on page 20. Over 85,000 applications were received in 2022, a 600% increase compared with 2021. Bless you. Though the licensing division experienced exceptional growth in applications, the public safety article establishes various requirements related to how quickly the division must turn around an application. So this necessitates the addition of positions in the 2023 deficiency. 20 positions will handle the increased caseloads, and an additional 2 positions being added via the deficiency will also help the division to handle its increased responsibilities as established by Chapter 55 of 2022. In order for the department to meet the requirements of the application process, the licensing division has had to increase its overtime usage. This is described in Exhibit 12. So the number of average weekly applications received rose from approximately 2,100 in calendar 2021 to 2,276 in 2022. Overtime expenses for the licensing division increased from $2.4 million in that year to $4.1 million in the working appropriation. Overtime usage for processing handgun permit applications in the same period is shown in Exhibit 13. Though the rate of increase in overtime hour usage has slowed down a bit, it continues to climb, and while only 316 hours of overtime were needed in June 2022, almost 1,400 were needed in August, and over 1,700 were needed in November. The increased workload, as indicated in the three previous exhibits, seems to warrant the need for additional staff. The DLS asked that the department comment on efforts taken by the division to ensure compliance with mandated application review and determination timeframes, including the use of contractual positions. State Police should further comment on how the addition of 22 positions in the working appropriation will help the division to manage its caseloads and the ability to fill those positions, given the existing difficulties with hiring civilian positions. The third and final issue begins on page 23 with a discussion of the Workforce Diversity Action Plan. This plan was created following the 2022 session, when the General Assembly expressed concern with the allegations of racial insensitivity and lack of diversity among the DSP workforce. State Police was directed to convene a diversity study to develop an action plan to address these concerns, and this study group met in the end of July of 2021. State Police provided data on the department's demographics among sworn and civilian employees, attrition rates, managerial and leadership positions, academy classes, and disciplinary actions for sworn and civilian personnel in a piece of committee narrative that was requested in the 2022 Joint Chairman's Report. Information from that report follow-up is shown in Exhibit 14. On January 1st, 2022, the department reports that it created an Office of Equity and Inclusion, and it has hired a director and deputy director since then. The interagency among other responsibilities, this office has program oversight of an interagency agreement between the state police and Morgan State University. This interagency agreement began on June 1st. And also as indicated by Exhibit 14, the department's civilian workforce is more racially and gender diverse than the sworn workforce. DLS recommends the addition of committee narrative to require state police to continue reporting on the progress it makes towards achieving its diversity action plan, and the recommendation for that is on page 25. Though the state police has reported progress made on implementing its action plan, the Department of Justice announced that it would be investigating the department in July of 2022 in order to determine if the state police's hiring and promotional practices had violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Additionally, a class action lawsuit was filed against the department by current and former employees in October that alleges racial discrimination in promoting and disciplinary practices. DLS asks that the department comment on its cooperation with the DOJ investigation and on the class action lawsuit to the extent possible. That concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Madeline. Are there any questions for the analysts from our members? Seeing none, thank you very much for your thorough analysis. We'll now have Colonel Roland Butler, Acting Superintendent. And if you want to introduce your panel and any other members you would like to bring up as well, please feel free to do so.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the House Public Safety and Administration Committee. I'm Colonel Roland L. Butler, Acting Superintendent of the Maryland Department of State Police. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Having only been in my position for about a week, I apologize for not having met with many of the members of the subcommittee before today, but I look forward to the opportunity to meet with you in the coming days and weeks. With me to my right is Mr. Paul Abel. He is our Chief Financial Officer, and behind me are the department's senior leaders. We hope we're able to meet your expectations and provide you with the information and the responses being sought. Before we begin today, I'd like to take a moment to thank Ms. Madeline Miller for her analysis. I appreciate her thorough analysis and professionalism in working with my staff. Mr. Chairman, you have our written responses to the analysis, but if you don't mind, I'd like to highlight just a couple of very important areas to me and to the department. Civilian vacancies. As I'm sure you and the members of the committee have heard time and time again, every budget hearing, vacancies and staffing shortages continue to be a challenge. For the Department of State Police, I sit before you encouraged by the progress and hard work being performed every day by our Human Resources Division. Despite continued turnover and the addition of 42 new positions in calendar year 2022, our Human Resources Division was able to hire 121 new civilian employees in 2022, an increase of 62 over our hires over 2021. We expect an even better hiring performance in 2023 as we embark on a new calendar year with a larger and fully trained Human Resource Division staff positioned to take advantage of salary enhancements and to offer more competitive starting salaries than seen in prior years. Finally, as my entire leadership team and I are eagerly awaiting the results and recommendations from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Focus Group and Workforce Analysis, I think this will help us identify deficiencies and move towards the direction of correcting said deficiencies and improve conditions for all Marylanders. As we've previously reported, our interagency agreement with the Morgan State University is expected to provide us with valuable insight from our sworn and civilian workforce, as well as from the communities we serve. By better understanding the feelings, perceptions, and beliefs of our people who we provide both services and we work with jointly, I am confident we'll make a positive and purposeful, actionable changes to help us do and move towards what the citizens of Maryland deserve. Regarding the 2021 Uniform Crime Report, as you already have heard, there are a number of changes to the National Crime Reporting System. As we've reported in previous years, JCRs, the FBI now requires states to convert to the NIBRS reporting process. Admittedly, the nation's conversion to this NIBRS system and summary reporting has not been without its challenges. In 2022, Department of Justice review of transition to law enforcement agency to NIBRS funding, data input, training gaps, Technology, procurement were all listed as challenges cited as being responsible for significant delays, obstacles preventing some law enforcement agencies from a successful transition. Maryland is no different. Our data contributors continue to report difficulties in procuring RMS systems capable of capturing and reporting neighbors' data. They report challenges with manual entry of incidents in the neighbors' collection tools, training gaps, and inconsistencies in data definitions. In Maryland, our law enforcement partners are submitting their data as required. Unfortunately, the data is in both summary and neighbors formats. Quality assurance reviews have identified data inconsistencies that demand attention and must be reconciled before the publication. I expect the Crime in Maryland book to be published in the beginning of March and caution that it may look different. What is not different about this whole project is the dedication and commitment of the Maryland State Police to assist and support our data contributors during the period of transition and beyond. Mr. Chairman, I am available to answer any questions you and your committee may have.
Thank you, Councilman Butler. I know we probably will have a few questions. Let me actually start with the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. Truly, the state troopers have had a large impact on my life, and now here I am serving as the Vice Chair of this subcommittee. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. When I was a freshman at the University of Maryland, it was actually the first day, 4 state troopers came and surrounded me because, of course, I fit a description. I still have to kind of wear that today. It's been an interesting little moment for me as I've prepared for you all to come and sit in front of us today. Culture starts at the top, Colonel. And so we see these headlines, specifically February 9th, 2023. I know that you're new, but this is new as well. It was saying that state police use quota-like systems to reward arrests and issue new vehicles. Are you aware of this article specifically, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about how you're going to make sure that we comply with state law? Because we know that quotas are against the law here in the state.
As I said on the press conference that announced my appointment, I intend to meet this head on. I will never support a quota. It is illegal. It goes against MSP policy. Understanding that the overarching goal is to ensure accountability and performance, a quota is not the way to do it. There were poorly written messages that were captured by the media, and then unfortunately that were filtered out to the troopers. That was met head on by the Chief of Field Operations Bureau, who met with the commanders and outlined what his expectations are, and I am comfortable with his expectations.
Interesting. Okay. So the Office of the Superintendent, could you explain to me a little bit about, what goes on in that department?
The Office of the Superintendent covers a myriad of responsibilities, not only the superintendent's position, but it also includes internal affairs, Office of Equity and Inclusion, a number of sensitive positions that report to them, to include executive protection.
Understood. The reason why I ask is, as we're deliberating what we're going to do as a committee and subcommittee, I want to make sure that if we're looking to, restrict funds, so on and so forth, that of course we're not, taking money away from places that shouldn't have money taken away. And again, I mentioned earlier that culture starts at the top. So I want to make sure that if we're going to make a recommendation to withhold or restrict funds, that it would be the higher level individuals that would feel the brunt of it.
That I cannot speak on in its entirety. I'd have to look at the actual budget allocation itself. But I assure you, the Maryland State Police would feel the brunt of any fiscal impact with withholding funds. We're looking to improve services, conditions for both sworn and civilian employees. We're trying to provide the best service we can. Understanding your cause 100%. And concern, particularly with your opening, I faced a similar situation in 1986 on Capitol Hill, and it did taint my judgment towards law enforcement until I had the opportunity to meet 6 law enforcement officers in a more relaxed setting, and I got to talk to each of those individuals from different departments. Of those 6, 2 were Maryland State Troopers. They were different. This is why I sit before you here today.
Wonderful. I know plenty police officers on every level, quite frankly, and I've been very close with the law enforcement community my entire life. And so for me, it was actually a shock because, this was something that I'd never seen before. And then when I started speaking to other members of the community, other students, so on and so forth, they just asked me how could I be so naive, quite frankly. I appreciate your responses here. We are going to dig a little deeper and make sure that we're addressing the top of the food chain because I believe that that's who sets the tone. If you all feel a little bit of pressure from us, maybe you'll apply that similar pressure to the rank and file and make sure everyone knows exactly what we're trying to do here in the state of Maryland.
I can assure you, under my leadership, we will be responsive to the community needs. We will hold people accountable. I will not tolerate inappropriate behavior. Everyone has the right and deserves to be treated fairly. When we uncover this, we will address it. It may not be pleasant, but it will be addressed.
Looking forward to it, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. As you can hear, we definitely take this job very seriously on behalf of the people of the state. And some of us even have personal experiences when it comes to law enforcement. And so, just want to make sure that, as you mentioned earlier, when you mentioned your remarks, you said that you're looking forward to reaching out and sitting down with each member of the committee. Grateful. We've already had that opportunity as of yesterday. I would definitely encourage you to do that with the rest of the members as well. Yep.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Stonka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to continue along the question line that Delegate Ivey started with. Have you been able to, or your team been able to use his terminology, culture starts at the top, where at the top that started, where those quota requirements, for lack of a better term, started and how that came to start?
If you want to look at this, I was an employee sworn up until January 1 for 28 and a half years. Understanding different things going on across the state, I think it was originally geared towards accountability of troopers in the time that they are working. Unfortunately, at some period over there, it morphed into something that it should not have morphed into. Keeping in mind, performance is only one of 15 factors that we now use to judge a trooper, to evaluate a trooper's performance. Unfortunately, knowing some of the back channel of this, I think this may have grown out of frustration of an individual trying to motivate people, and there was a misstep. That individual's been talked to, it's been documented, and we're not going to go down that road again. If it does happen again, obviously we'll meet it head on. We do not want people victimized traveling through our states or citizens within our state. Our goal is to reduce traffic fatalities. A part of reducing traffic fatalities is traffic enforcement, and it may not be pleasant, but it's necessary.
Do you know how high up in the organization this was known prior to the media release and Delegate Grammer's?
I think it may have stopped at that barrack commander, troop commander level. That was the first question I had. Who else saw those emails beyond the isolated barrack? I think that was identified in the press release, the press article on the 9th of February. It shouldn't have happened. At the end of the day, you're charged with a responsibility. Your responsibilities grow as you grow in rank. If you're a lieutenant, you're charged with ensuring that the welfare of 30 to 40 people that are going out there and protecting citizens. If you're that captain, you may have 3 to 5 barracks underneath you. You have to be in daily contact with them. I am not a micromanager. I do not believe in micromanaging. I believe people should have the opportunity to perform. In saying that, you still have to give them parameters to perform within. You have to evaluate their performance against those parameters. What that does mean is having difficult conversations sometime. Difficult conversations have to be had. The only thing I say is leave the person with their dignity. Hey, you came up short on this. Let's take a look at it and make sure we're looking at the same thing. What do you think you could have done better? What could I have done to assist you as your immediate supervisor? Those are the conversations I want to happen. I want those conversations to be documented. I know people tend to shun that. Oh my God, there was something documented against me. It's so inappropriate. But at the same time, it gives that individual a tangible object to look at and say, I can build against this and put something in the bank of goodwill and show that I am capable of receiving a message, holding myself accountable, holding my people accountable, and going the right direction and moving towards the path desired by the upper level of the administration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Colonel, obviously, the state police have some challenges, and you were brought in to handle those challenges head on. And there obviously have been some news articles as well. One that I'm interested in is the one around the challenge coins and what's been going on with that. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
For those that aren't familiar, if you look at the tradition of a challenge coin, it was meant to be a positive commemorization of an event. Unfortunately, we have people that lack maturity and understanding to realize they're not throwing a pebble in a pond, and what they thought was amusing is not, it's hurtful. And not only is it hurtful, you made a permanent reminder for whatever issue you thought was funny, and I do not think it's funny. We do have a bill before you all to limit the use of the state police likeness, image, badge, and the actual patch. I think that's moving in the right direction. But more importantly, direct communication and reminders. I think we've done a good job trying to communicate that and find out who is doing what. It's difficult. There are probably a core group of people doing this, and I think the only way you stay on top of this is keep delivering that message, finding out what's going on with people. One of the things that I would encourage every person at every level of the command staff, you cannot run your operation from your office. If you're not going out and having daily contact with your people, understanding what mood they may be in coming to work, hey, how was your weekend? How you doing? How's your family doing? And they know you build that rapport. With building that same rapport, you want to build an understanding of expectations and accountability. I appreciate what you do. You go out and you do it every day. I appreciate the fact you come to work on time and you do a great job. However, you're a trooper 24/7. I need you to pay attention to what you do. There is always someone watching you. And the last thing I want is you setting an inappropriate example. You're far better served to perform and within the confines of the rules, regulations, and expectations of the public, because there's some trooper or someone out there, some small child that wants to emulate you. Hey, I want to be like him. He had an impact.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for the Colonel? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here, and we look forward to working with you as you go through your confirmation and moving forward throughout the year. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank the members for their candor. I truly appreciate it.
So that will end the hearing for the Department of the State Police. We will now move on to the Office of the Public Defender. We will begin with the budget analysis by Mr. Jacob Polakov.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give them a second. The Office of the Public Defender provides counsel and related services to indigent persons through 12 district operations, 4 divisions, and 2 specialized units. Legal representation is provided in criminal trials, bail reviews, appeals, juvenile cases, post-conviction proceedings, parole and probation revocations, and involuntary commitments to mental institutions. To get all of that done, the fiscal 2024 budget for the Office of the Public Defender increases by $9.2 million, or about 7%, to $141 million. $141.1 million. On page 2, we have information regarding proposed deficiency appropriations for fiscal 2023. Proposed deficiency appropriations supplement the budget for the Office of the Public Defender by $926,938 in general funds for the purpose of funding accrued leave payouts. OPD has cited the number of retirees in fiscal 2023, along with the seniority of those employees, as the reason for the deficiency. Approximately 80% of the fiscal 2024 agency allowance is allocated for regular personnel salaries, as illustrated in Exhibit 1 on page 2. Case-related expenses, including panel attorneys, comprise an additional 10% of the OPD allowance. And we can see that the remaining 10% is split amongst multiple other things, including contractual services, rent, state service charges, and other expenses. As shown in Exhibit 2 on page 3, the fiscal 2024 allowance for OPD increases by $9.2 million, or again, approximately 7%. The majority of the increase is allocated for personnel spending, with the largest changes funding 27 new assistant public defenders, 9 secretaries, 4 social workers, and 3 paralegals. An increase in spending on employee and retiree health insurance, increase in salary for several employees, and the annualization of the November 22 4.5% cost of living adjustment. The Juvenile Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Project grant decreases in the fiscal 2024 allowance by approximately $102,000. Funding through the grant had been provided from the U.S. Department of Justice since fiscal 2020 to support collaboration across systems to improve responses and outcomes for youth with mental illness or simultaneous mental illness and substance abuse who come into contact with the juvenile justice system. In fiscal 2023, OPD was able to award $151,000 to Maple Shade, which is an Eastern Shore mental health facility. In fiscal 2024, the remaining $49,740 is being used for the same purpose and funds 1 social worker. On page 4, you'll find that OPD should comment on whether the project was considered successful and whether it is expected to continue with the conclusion of federal resources. Looking to page 5, we have personnel data. We'll find that the OPD personnel allowance increases by a net 53.5 positions in fiscal 24. But first, we'll touch on the fact that as of December 31st, 2022, there were 92.5 positions vacant at OPD, which accounted for just about 10.5% of their total personnel allowance. And that's about 37.6 positions over what is assumed should be vacant at any given time. Vacancies at OPD remaining exceptionally high is a cause for ongoing concern. OPD, as previously mentioned, had 92.5 vacant positions, with a full breakdown of the vacant positions as of December 31st in Exhibit 3 on page 5. Notably, 62.5 of those vacancies, more than 2/3, are for assistant public defenders, which are critical, obviously, to the operations of the office. The fiscal 2024 allowance for OPD includes 43 new regular positions and 10.5 new contractual positions. OPD's need for contractual positions has historically fluctuated based on workload demands, with the number of contractual positions having gone down in fiscal 23 and now increasing again to restore some of that decrease in fiscal 24. The 43 new regular positions all do have at least 1 matching vacancy as of December 31st, 2022. In Exhibit 4 on page 6, we'll find a full comparison of existing vacancies and the new positions, and we will see that there are 27 new APDs in the fiscal 24 budget, but there are also 17 vacant APD positions in district court operations, 5 vacancies in juvenile court, 2 in parental defense, and 22 vacant assistant public defender positions in the circuit court. OPD should comment on their strategy for filling the existing vacancies, how the annual salary review, ASR, will be applied, and a timeline for filling positions to reduce vacancies in line with budgeted turnover. Additionally, OPD should comment on why the new positions are needed and how they differ, if at all, from existing vacant positions. Going to page 8, we'll find the first of our key observations. The 2022 Joint Chairman's Report requested a report regarding OPD's staffing needs. OPD's report utilized workload standards from 2005, as opposed to new standards which were due to be released by the American Bar Association and others in calendar 2022. However, owing to a delay in the release of those new standards, the previous standards from 2005 continue to be used. OPD's average attorney caseloads by division exceed the standard number of cases in 3 of the 4 divisions where a standard exists. The highest disparities, as seen in Exhibit 5 on page 8, are in mental health division, where attorneys average 963 active matters, which is 130 above the standard of 833 active matters, along with the post-conviction division, where attorneys average 147 matters above the standard of 70 at one time. The fact that three case types exceed the standards set for OPD is a critical issue which needs to be addressed in order for the office to achieve its goal of providing superior legal representation to indigent defendants. As shown in Exhibit 6, which can be found on the entirety of page 10, OPD estimates that they need to add 42 attorneys to bring their caseloads in line with standards, with 39 of those 42 going to the circuit court and 3 to the district court. The fiscal 24 allowance provides 27 attorney positions, which partially addresses the staffing shortfall. However, as the exhibit on page 10 further reveals, distribution among the jurisdictions is not even, as some jurisdictions have filled positions beyond what is needed to meet caseload standards, while others fall short. OPD should comment on the extent to which existing staff could be redistributed based on the workload needs identified in each jurisdiction. The Department of Legislative Services recommends the adoption of committee narrative, requesting a report on average caseloads within OPD and how caseloads compare to the new standards, which are expected to be released in calendar 2023 by the American Bar Association and others. On page 11, we'll find the second of our key observations, which discusses attorney departures outpacing hiring in consecutive years. OPD staffing struggles involve issues on both ends, with hiring and retention. In order to better understand the scope of the personnel problems with which OPD is contending, the 2022 JCR requested a report on staffing in terms of hiring and separation. The report revealed that in fiscal 2018 through 2020, the office was able to hire more attorneys than they lost to retirements, transfers, and other reasons for departure. However, in fiscal 2021 and 2022, the office lost a combined 24 more attorneys than they were able to hire. Attorney hiring and separation is detailed with further data in Exhibit 7 in the middle of page 11. The retirements of multiple senior attorneys in fiscal 2022 also created more vacancies for higher level attorneys, which has caused OPD to need to adjust their hiring practices to fill those more senior roles. In addition to attorney roles where less experience is needed, this has resulted in changes to the number of APDs hired at different classifications. In fiscal 2022, 13 attorneys were hired as APD 3s in contrast to the prior 4 fiscal years, having seen a combined 20 attorneys hired at that level. Exhibit 8 in the middle of page 12 illustrates the number of attorneys hired at different classification levels between fiscal 2018 to fiscal 2022, along with the total number of applicants in each year. Despite these changes in hiring practices, the past 2 fiscal years have shown that OPD is contending with a number of issues while attempting to be properly staffed, including departures outpacing hiring and decreasing retention of senior attorneys. OPD should comment on what further changes in hiring practices can be made to allow for hiring of attorneys to outpace departures. Additionally, OPD should comment on the difference between the number of applicants for APD positions and the number of applicants hired and how current hiring processes impact this difference. On page 14, we'll find our single operating budget recommended action, which is to adopt a narrative requesting a caseload standards report to be submitted in November of 2023, detailing the average caseloads for attorneys in all of OPD's tracked case types between fiscal 2019 to 2023, using the new standards that are expected to be adopted this year. With that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jacob. Are there any questions for our analysts? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for your thorough analysis. We will now turn it over to the Office of the Public Defender, and we have with us for the first time our new public defender, Natasha Darteague. Did I say that correctly?
You did. Thank you very much.
Floor is yours. Please introduce your members as well.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairman Bridges, members of the committee. I am Natasha Darteague, State Public Defender. Seated to my left is OPD's Chief Financial Officer, Kathleen Mattis. Seated to my right is my Deputy Public Defender, Keith Lothridge. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to discuss fiscal year 24 budget for the Office of the Public Defender and to respond to the Department of Legislative Services budget analysis. I wish to recognize and thank our DLS budget analyst, Jacob Palikoff, for his thorough and insightful analysis. I would also like to say thank you to DBM, who we worked in partnership to get to this point. Our senior management team has successfully advocated for 43 new positions, of which include 27 new attorney positions. And that does, in fact, reflect an initial phase that we seek to incorporate as we move forward. DBM has been crucial and extremely helpful in moving us forward. In doing so, they have reflected a true understanding of the challenges that we face. However, we are here on a new day, and I say that in that the legislature has new authority. And as such, my ask, a request of you today, is not simply that you approve the budget as presented to you, but I do have two additions. The first is that you exercise your authority to supplement our fiscal year 24 budget by providing additional funding to convert contractual employee positions to permanent employees. These are contractual employees who have dedicated service to the Office of the Public Defender for more than 2 years. The second component of my ask is in line with equity. I am specifically asking that wherever else that you deem appropriate in the criminal legal system to provide additional resources, that you provide parity with the Office of the Public Defender and make equal investments. What do I mean? Where there are proposed increases in the judiciary, judges increases, staff judges increases, where there are proposed increases in the state prosecution's offices or law enforcement, I am seeking parity that will require additional staff positions to be added to the Office of the Public Defender to meet the workload standards for our practice. And I dare say that this is not a large ask. Why I say that? Because the Office of the Public Defender serves a critical function for the state. It is a function that no other agency does or can perform. We at the Office of the Public Defender stand side by side with individuals every day. We stand side by side with the woman who's losing her child in the courts in Baltimore City. We stand next to the boy who's charged with carjacking Prince George's County. We stand next to the drunk driver who's charged with vehicular homicide in Ocean City. The needs of the Office of the Public Defender reflect the needs of the individuals that we represent. Office of the Public Defender represents individuals in all 27 Maryland counties with a total of 52 offices statewide. Our office provides a cogent value to an investment that reaches far beyond the courtroom. Our attorneys are subject matter experts who, in addition to their direct client work, collaborate with local partners on addressing systemic concerns and share their unique expertise with stakeholders, as well as provide our clients with appropriate community-based service providers. OPD's value to Maryland warrants significant investment beyond what has been provided in previous years. OPD is in crisis. Now, let me be clear to the depth of my understanding. Although I have only led as the PD for a few short months, I have served Maryland as a public defender for over 26 years. So when I speak from a place of knowledge. OPD is in crisis. I am requesting the increase in our budget, and the request is an urgent one. I speak of the urgent need by the 3 R's, and it is my hope that I adequately address the comments and concerns. My 3 R's are recruitment, retention, and repercussions. When I speak about recruitment, OPD is incorporating a multifaceted approach to filling our vacancies. As of Monday, February the 27th, 2023, OPD has 67 attorney vacancies. Our new recruiting director that was hired in October of 2022 has restarted our pipeline that has been interrupted by COVID. But the reality is that we must offer a more competitive wage. People who leave OPD don't leave OPD and go into different industries. We're finding that people are leaving OPD but continuing in public interest work just in other places where they are paid more and have a lighter workload. In fiscal year 2022, we lost 26.3% of our attorney workforce. Hiring practices, I would say, are not dispositive or reflective of our vacancy rate. Our recruitment and retention challenges are directly correlated to salary and workload. Of the 109 job offers that were made in fiscal year 22, 21 were rejected or withdrawn because of the salary offer that was made. Likewise, excessive workloads have led to OPD attorney turnover in fiscal year 22. This has further been exacerbated by COVID and the Great Resignation. This is extremely problematic for OPD because there's also been a great number of loss in terms of our circuit court attorneys. These are the APD 3-level attorneys, those who handle the more serious cases in the circuit court, the murders, the sex offenses, the carjackings. The new 27 positions that have been acquired represent part of our strategic plan. And essentially, it is the creation of a higher grade of trial attorney that we call the senior APD 3 attorney. The senior APD 3 attorney expands the career path to which beyond what currently exists, especially for those who are in a non-managerial circuit court attorney position. The 27 new attorney positions will allow for OPD to promote from within to higher paid positions, while also filling vacancies at the entry level, which is, quite frankly, easier to recruit. I also want to speak in regards to our core staff, our paralegals, our social workers, our secretaries, our intake workers. The efficiency and the effectiveness of our operations rests squarely on their shoulders. Their quality of work is important for what we do every day. They must be paid more. Similar to our attorneys, our senior leadership team is working to restructure the core staff organization and increase compensation to better reflect the expertise, the impact, and the immense value that our core staff brings to the team. To that end is where I speak about my request that you exercise your newly deemed authority and expand funding so that OPD may convert contractual employees to permanent positions. My second R was to speak about retention. Although salaries are an extreme challenge for OPD, it is not the only challenge that we face in terms of keeping talent. There's the issue of workloads. OPD attorneys carry an excessive high volume of cases that involve increasingly more time. You think about the increased use of body cams throughout the state, require a greater level of legal expertise. You think about cell phone triangulation, more technical administrative support. We're dealing with electronic filing and electronic discovery, as well as additional expert services, for example, coordination with DNA experts. The excessive workloads reverberate throughout all issues, through recruitment, through retention, through compensation, and most definitely through morale. I would also emphasize that the redistribution of employees is not a viable solution, because simply transferring current insufficient resources to another location only seems to shift the problem. Because we are a statewide agency, our HR department has become adept at deploying resources, but the reality is with 52 offices across the state, I cannot simply move a team member or a worker in Hagerstown to fill a need in Salisbury. The third I would speak about is the repercussions. OPD's high workloads and non-competitive pay has further delayed our ability to address some of the reallocation efforts. If you are a fan of Game of Thrones, if you've ever seen the series, I would say to you, winter is coming. There's a warning of things to come. If you're not familiar with Game of Thrones, essentially it was the forbearing warning that there was something coming, and it also spoke about those who did not heed the warning. I tell you, the workload standards are coming. The ABA standards that will define what is a proper attorney-case ratio will show that the status quo is abhorrent and that we cannot and must not continue. OPD needs additional resources. We need additional resources to meet our day-to-day challenges and the volume of work, to keep pace with the changing legal environment, to mirror the resources of our other criminal justice partners, and to simply do the work that we are mandated to do. We must better compensate our attorneys and core staff for the work that they perform in order to recruit, retain, and provide the superior legal representation we are required. But most importantly, this is what our clients deserve. You will hear oral testimony from others detailing the immense reach OPD has throughout Maryland. As the leader of the Maryland Office of Public Defender, I am proud of the team of talented, dedicated, and resilient public servants that work for the state. I urge you to return a favorable report consisting of approval of the fiscal year 24 budget, but that it also contain additional funding to convert contractual employee positions to permanent employees, and also provide equity and parity with any increases in the judiciary and state prosecutorial offices. OPD, and I must emphasize that OPD defends individuals. Individuals solidify families. Families are what comprises of communities. And we're talking about communities from the mountains to the shores and each town in between. These are the people which OPD touches. The value of investment in OPD is simply ensuring justice, fairness, and dignity for all people of Maryland. Thank you, and I am open to questions.
Madam Public Defender, for your first time coming before our committee, I don't think we've ever had anyone come with such passion and requests for us as well. You know what you want, and we appreciate that. We want to be partners in helping you to figure everything out as well. And so I do have a couple of questions that I wanted to start off with, and it's related to some of the things that you actually requested of us in terms of, one, the changes in the criminal justice agencies like Judiciary and Attorney General's office. How does adding more prosecutors to OPD affect what's going on with those, or vice versa? Like, is it the salaries that we need to have in parity with those other agencies, or just increased staffing models that they have that you're also looking for? What's the sort of parity that you're looking for between those other agencies?
Thank you for the question. So it is twofold. So when we talk about salaries, the salaries should be more in parity with the Office of the Attorney General. We are lagging behind those salaries. When I also speak about parity, when we're increasing the number of judges, for example, we are expanding expanding the courts. That is additional judges, additional courtrooms, additional staffing, and we are essentially part of that whole equation. We therefore need additional attorneys to staff the same courtrooms. In turn, we need additional secretaries, additional social workers, and the entire team. We have found that as the law evolves, and as it should, for example, we think about the youth access to counsel interrogation hotline, right? That is a much needed change in the law. But as change comes, we also must adapt as an agency, and that requires additional attorneys, additional resources, additional time that at the moment may not be thought of, but as now we grow, we understand that there is that need. So that's what when we speak about parity, it is both twofold, the salary, but also just the increase as to the personnel.
Right. And with the contractual positions you were talking about, converting those to full-time staff, were they, how were they helping? Were they attorneys? Were they some of the other staff that you also talked about?
The contractual positions are essentially employees that we have that have been dedicated to the Office of the Public Defender for more than 2 years. So those are the persons. I'm sorry, core staff. I'm not sure what I said. Yes, core staff. When I say core staff, that is our support staff. And we refer to them as core staff because they are the core of what we do. So those are, I'm going to turn to my CFO, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I heard that you had asked if they were attorneys. They are not. We do
They're
not
not
have
attorneys,
contractual
though.
attorneys.
Okay, but they are support that's helping with the organization
Correct.
and the things that you need, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, they include our social workers. We have contractual social workers. We have contractual office workers, yes. The only persons who are not contractual are the attorneys.
got it. And the 43 new positions that are budgeted for 2024, what are your plans for those positions?
So for the new positions, the attorney positions are essentially to create our senior APD 3 position. It will give us an opportunity to have another pay grade that does not currently exist. It would allow us to create another career path step that does not currently exist. It is also an opportunity to promote from within. So we have attorneys that have that more senior level experience. It is an opportunity for us to retain. We're losing our senior attorneys to other area public interest agencies and the federal government. As I put it, we're being continually poached for our senior talent. It'll give us an opportunity to keep that talent. As we're moving people up from within, it is easier for us to recruit on the more entry level, so we will be able to bring in more people that way.
Got it. And, I know my colleagues have questions as well, but let me just ask one last question before I turn it over. Is it true that you are, in fact, the first African-American public defender in the state of Maryland?
I am, in fact, the first African-American public defender for the state of Maryland, yes.
Wish we would have got you here last month, a day before for Black History Month. We could have talked about that, but every day is Black History Month.
It's Women's History Month.
Thank you so very much. Vice Chair Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think you have to apologize for asking questions. It's your committee. And thank you so much for being here. The work that you've been doing over, you said 20 plus years.
26 years and 7 months.
Well, I'm 27, so.
Stop. Are you 27 years old?
So there we are. No, but the reason why I wanted, yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure everyone, okay. So we had the, we had the Attorney General here a couple days ago, and I don't know if it was asked on the record what the salary should be increased to within the Office of the Attorney General, but didn't really get a straight answer back. And I'd like to know what you think would be a competitive starting salary so that you could fully staff your office. Like, give us numbers. What should we be increasing salaries to? I know that's a general question, but we're about to have to pass a budget soon, and we need to have some real numbers.
As a starting new attorney at the Office of the Public Defender, I would say it should be no less than $90,000.
Okay, what are they currently?
What is the current 7? I was going to say course indulgence, but no.
I was going to say it's in the 70s. It's a grade 20, step 7 is our sort of.
I think it's 77
New
new attorneys.
grade, it's a grade 20, step 2.
Okay.
Is our threshold.
So, do you all know what other OPDs, other public defenders' offices pay? They're starting.
Yeah.
PDs.
We do have it.
Okay.
It's a little aged because it's from last year's JCR. It has Virginia, DC, and the agreed. So that was our starting one. Theirs was that. For Virginia.
So I have, and I'm trying to read this quickly. So I have a starting salary for a public defender in Arlington, Virginia is $86,547. In Fairfax County, Virginia is $89,000. And
That's a year old.
This is from 22, I'm sorry, this was from 21, when they were comparing it to OPD Maryland, and at the time, ours was 65.8. So I imagine since ours has gone up, theirs is probably significantly higher as well.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I know that individuals who work as public defenders aren't always excited to go and become prosecutors. Like, that's against, a lot of the culture.
But it takes a special person to do public defense work. So,
Completely agree.
yes, it is not for
100%.
everyone.
So I just asked because, we're about to have to pass the budget soon, and we need to know exactly what you're asking for, like the dollar amount. So if you all could get back to us, I was looking for, some written testimony, surrounding this specifically, and it would really be helpful. So thank you so much.
I'm sorry. To be clear, you're requesting how much it would cost. You'd like us to send you the information, what it would cost us to raise our entry-level attorneys to a starting salary of $90,000?
Nah, more so your moonshot.
Our moonshot.
You're trying to fill your department.
Absolutely.
Right, absolutely.
And you're having trouble because of caseloads, of course, but also because of pay.
Absolutely,
yes.
yes.
Okay, so what do we need to do to take at least the pay, aspect of it off the table?
Yes,
right?
we will have those numbers to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I got to go back to the recommended actions from the report. You, when it came to concurring with the DLS caseload standards report, we didn't get an answer or a response on that. Do you concur with the DLS caseload standards report? It was in the DLS recommendation was to adopt that narrative for the report.
I'm sorry, if you...
Page 14.
Page 14.
Yep.
So I will just say that we are in the position that we are waiting for the ABA report that will be specifically in terms of what the appropriate workload. I do emphasize when we are speaking currently that there is a distinction to be made between caseloads and workloads, because at times you will look at the numbers and it would appear that there's a decrease in case numbers. However, that is not an accurate reflection of what is the current status of the practice. And I give an example that, for example, you're at the grocery store and there is a robbery. You have 8 officers that essentially respond. You have the body cam of the 8 officers. You have the video camera of the store. If there's any other video footage from the outside, you as a practitioner must and are required to view each of these videos. And I say you view each of these videos at least 3 times, right? So let's just use an example of 5 officers that responded. That's 15 hours. And we're saying, let's say they only stayed an hour, which is not generally the case. Before you've even done your basic review of the case, spoken to witnesses, spoken to your client, there's a basic at least 15 hours of video that you have to watch, right? Because the first time you got to watch and make sure you get a sense of what happened. Second time, you're taking notes and to see what happened. And the third time, at the very least, to make sure what you think you saw, you actually did see. You have not done any of the other parts that is necessary. You haven't yet added the hours of talking to your client. Remember, I said it was in the store. You haven't talked to any of the people that were in the store at the time. It hasn't included you going out to the store and everything else that you would normally do. So you have to think about how the practice, because of technology, has evolved. And then you're going to add in the fact that your client says he wasn't there, and you have eyewitnesses, and maybe you have cell phone technology that speaks to the like of it, right? So, and I just described one case. Your caseload may be 75 cases. So perhaps the year before, your caseload may have been 80 cases, but now because of the different varying issues in terms of technology, that case, the number went down of the number of cases, but your workload has significantly increased. So that is where it's really important that the distinction is made and consideration really be focused on workload, not simply the number of cases individuals are carrying, because that can be very deceiving.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you a separate question, though, about the hiring of the vacant positions that you also have, pending whatever we might be able to do around salary increases and the parity that we talked about. Do you have a current plan for filling those vacancies?
We have more than a plan. I have had the benefit of hiring a new director of recruitment and a new energy and essentially a new focus. We are doing the traditional advertising in various places, including social media, but we have developed new partners in terms of the Maryland State Bar Association, where we have the opportunity to partner with them and appear at their various functions. We are more aligned with the law schools than we were before. Essentially, we are making more of a presence in various professional settings to get the word out that not only OPD is hiring, but as well as just being more in the community so that the community knows us better and better knows our work. And we're essentially attracting persons in that way as well. And the law school is an important part of us developing our pipeline, but we're infusing new energy and we're expanding the places and the ways in which we have engaged community. And I say that in all levels, in our practice, in our recruitment, as well as in our retention.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Delegate McComas.
I'm going to make a joke, and please don't take it the wrong way. You know that if a person can hire a real lawyer, they don't want the public defender. But the dirty little secret is the real lawyer asks the public defender all about the judges and, you know, how to handle the case. So I have a great deal of respect for the public defender's office because I think you do a hard job with a lot of lack of materials. So my question to you is, it used to be in the old days, okay, because I got gray hair, that there were folks that were investigators for the, like our where I'm from. And do you still have investigators that assist the public defenders that could you know, I realize it's important to see the scene of the crime. It's important to review the videos, but if you could have somebody that could at least, you know, take a swipe or two at it before the attorney has to, that would be good. The other thing I want to ask is, the one thing that we heard from parole and probation was they don't have anybody to do any of the clerical work. And I suspect, and I have heard from our folks where I'm from, that they're doing all their clerical work, the attorneys. And so I think that, in other words, we need them kind of thinking and able to talk to people and, you know, strategizing and not doing things that they really shouldn't be doing because they've got some other folks that can do it. So can you?
So in answer to your question, yes, we have investigators as staff, but only in certain counties. The majority of our investigation is through panel. So, and I'm going to have our CFO supplement that in a moment. But in regards to the other part of your comment, we don't have enough. So we do have core staff, but we don't have enough, especially as the practice has changed and evolved and there's greater use of technology in terms of filing and download. It takes more hours for everyone. So we definitely don't have enough staff. And it makes it difficult because at the end of the day, it is the attorney's responsibility when they step into court to have done everything on the checklist. In an ideal situation, what I am seeking is absolutely additional staff so that the lawyers can do the portion of the work that only the lawyers can do, and that the core staff can essentially be the vital member of the team that they are and provide support where only they can provide support. But where we exist now, unfortunately, people are wearing different hats to make sure that things are being done. And when I say the team is dedicated and resilient, it is really, I can't even express to the degree that people are really just supporting one another and doing more than probably they I would say paid to do. I'll dare say that. They do more than they're paid to do, and they should be paid more. But I think she wanted to...
Well, I just want to say in 2007, OPD had 1,017 employees, and today we have 888 and a half, and the difference is all core staff. When I joined the agency in 2010, they had in-house investigators assigned throughout the state, but the prior administration agreed to abolish them. So I think we have like 3. I mean, it's a handful left, and we were given a budget to use outside investigators. Nowhere near the flexibility of in-house you can imagine. It's much harder a process to engage them on a case-by-case basis, and we encourage it, but I think it's highly underutilized.
Employees to flee because of MDEC and all the, you get frustrated. You want to throw the computer out the window.
I wouldn't say it would take, did you say some of our employees to flee? I'm not sure they were fleeing. However, I would say that one of the things we've talked about is the fact that we have fewer core staff. And the ones we've had to train up in many ways. We're not really compensating them. MDEC certainly reflects that. I know certain jurisdictions, the most recent jurisdiction I think to get MDEC was Prince George's County. And what that did to their ability to do intake was devastating, because for every jailable ticket, they now had to do a manual entry of the line of appearance. So it actually dramatically, at least temporarily, increased our workload. And it also required a lot more skill by each one of those fantastic intake workers all across the state that basically had to learn a lot more and very quickly. And all of this are duties that we really can't give to anybody else, because there's no one else to shift into those positions. So I'm not going to, again, I'm worried Judge Morrissey might watch this, so I'm not going to say anything else about MDEC. However, yes, it has not exactly made our life easier in every circumstance, to say the least.
And I would add, there is no MDEC in Baltimore City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Line, right? That's what we've heard. That Baltimore City's the last one.
Yes, and I think the 24 date was before COVID.
Because I think you've got several different systems, and they're not interrelated. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Nope, you're fine. I don't think we have any more questions. I'll just mention we're joined by the Vice Chair of Appropriations as well. So again, thank you so very much for being here. We appreciate you coming, and like I said, for your first hearing, this was a very lively experience sitting here with you for your first hearings. Definitely appreciate you. Look forward to working with you. I know we also have some public comment, and so for the public comment, let me just remind you all that you have 2 minutes for public comment. And so I'm going to call all 4 of you up that signed up for public testimony. That's Gregory Garnes, Kendra Dove, Sally Larson, and Willie Flowers. Whoever wants to begin, just make sure you introduce yourself and speak into the microphone.
Thank you. I'm Willie Flowers. I'm with the NAACP Maryland State Conference. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. This is the first time I've seen you in this position. Congratulations. Now, I'm speaking on behalf of the NAACP with full support of the public defender, because we're partners with them. While they are the, I think, first responders in this thing about public defense. We're the first responders when people call when they want public defense, and we have to refer them to the public defender. And I'm also run a small organization in Park Heights community that is full of people who need the support of the public defender, and I've seen it up close. And from that standpoint, they call it the neighborhood defenders. Their section that oversees the human services profile of their office with social workers and this type of modality is extremely important to the Park Heights community. Not only do they do the work for social workers, but they also do, they're a load of volunteers for everything that we do. We work with them very closely. And one thing that I want to highlight, because we're having this conversation, and when we're talking about cannabis and the transition there, and people who are coming back, returning citizens, and that reality, when any individual in communities like the one I work in have these challenges with, when they want to get back on their feet with jobs, very often they have challenges with expungement. And as you know, when you have to get something expunged off your record, it doesn't happen overnight. So they may lose that job. And the one partner that we have in the community is the public defender to do that role and to do that work. So, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And not only does the public defender in the office I work in, they have the ability to do that and work with them through that period, but they also have the opportunity to refer them to behavioral services that they need, and by fact that they have other challenges. So I want to fully support the public defender's funding in this appropriation. Thank you.
Whoever wants to go next.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Garnes. I am a returning citizen. I spent 28 years, 1 month, and 17 days in prison. I've been home for a year, 1 month, and 1 day. I am in full support of getting more funding for the Public Defender's Office. Always I'm referred to Mr. Brian Sacinti, my public defender, as my Michael Jordan. And if anyone knows anything about basketball, Michael Jordan did not win a championship until he got Scottie Pippen. He did not become great until he got Kukoc, until he got Kerr. He would not be who he is without his Phil Jackson, right? That's the only way I can express it. I get calls all the time asking about him and guys wanting him to be their attorney. I say, hey, look, that's out of his control, but once you begin to do that type of work, once you begin to have that type of passion, you are sought after. I am a representation of him and the guys that I left. Now, one thing we know, time is always of the essence because we have to prove who we are once we come into this world. It's a window we come in, it's a door we come out of. The work that he is doing because he knows time is of the essence. And one thing I begin to realize as I begin to age in prison, though I still can do some of the things I can do, my ability is waning. I am not going to be here forever, and he hears that all the time. I've seen guys in prison that I thought were supermen, and I've left those guys and come back into that institution, seen those guys in wheelchairs, seen those guys sick, so he understands his job. If we are going to give people like myself a second chance, we have to give him the help and support for that second chance to be gotten right now. Look, when I spoke to the judge, when I spoke to the parole board, I have to be honest. I said, whatever I supposed to learn in prison, I learned it 10 years ago. I thought I was prepared then. I wasn't being arrogant. I was just being honest. I knew I was ready. I knew I had enough. When he hears those stories, and there's guys that's better than me that taught me, I'm a representation of them. I'm always going to be a representation of him. And anytime he calls me to do anything, as I've done in the community, giving back, I've now graduated. I came home in January of last year. I went to barbering school. I'm soon to go to fitness training. I'm going to be a nutritionist. And I also do freelance security. And I had to be vigilant. I did security for Kwesi and Fume, and if I wasn't here right now, I'd be doing security for Chris Rock at the Hippodrome. Matter of fact, when I leave, I'm going to change into my Superman suit.
Well, when you leave, I might have to track you down because I need a haircut. So thank you for your testimony. Definitely appreciate it. Next person.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. And it's an honor to appear alongside Mr. Flowers and Mr. Garnes. Thank you both. My name is Sally Larson. I'm an APD3 attorney with the Office of the Public Defender, and I'm also a proud member of the Maryland Defenders Union, AFSCME Local 423. I'm coming here today to share that our agency is in a staffing crisis. We need drastically more PINs than we are currently allocated in order to provide our clients with the representation that they deserve and that they are also constitutionally entitled to. AFSCME has submitted several additional written testimonies from other OPD attorneys, and I urge you to take the time to read them all because each of them paints an incredibly compelling picture of the staffing crisis we're suffering through. But in the short time I have today, I will just say that working at OPD right now is an exercise in triage. Many of our offices are functioning with half the attorneys they used to have. Meanwhile, the amount of work that is required per case has gone through the roof with the advent of police body camera footage, cell phone technologies, the increased use of forensic science evidence. My colleagues and I are working every day, every night, and every weekend in order to try to keep up, and we are still not able to keep up. As a result, our clients are often sitting in jail for over a year waiting for their trial date. Some of them are taking guilty pleas just to get out of jail. You know, despite our best efforts due to the overwhelming caseload, we sometimes miss crucial evidence. We sometimes miss deadlines to file important motions to preserve our clients' rights. This is not for lack of trying, but it is for lack of sufficient staff. The people of Maryland deserve better, and the Constitution demands that we do better. To get OPD to where we need to be, we have to stop attorneys from leaving, and we have to replace the ones we've already lost. But no one is going to join or stay at an agency that is in triage mode. So we need to make OPD an agency where attorneys who work hard can provide excellent representation to their clients. To do that is going to require a drastic increase in the number of PINs. So I'm very glad to see the increase in the PINs that has been recommended by the governor's budget, but honestly, we will need many, many more in order to get us to a place where we can give each of our clients the representation that they deserve. Thank you.
My name is Kendra Dove. I'm a member at AFSCME 423, and I have been with the Office of Public Defenders for over 2 years. I'm currently staffed as a Secretary Level 1, but due to staffing shortages, I work 3 different positions. Last year alone, I only made $35,000, even with working multiple positions, and I'm not alone. I did want to address a question that came up earlier. Core staff includes secretaries, intake, paralegals, admin aides, and office clerks. Most of the core staff are not contractual, but those of us who are contractual, they do not receive the benefits of paid holidays, paid leave, and honestly, they get worse insurance than us. They have to work so much harder. Along with low pay, this is a big recruitment and retention issue for core staff. Contractual positions were originally supposed to be a short-term support, but now it's become a long-term crutch. For OPD, this is very bad for employees. Our budget for Anne Arundel District Court 7. It is beyond low, and it's not only lower, it's not even low, it's lower than the average State Department budget. Our office has such a hard time with our technology. Like, our one main source is eDefender. That's where we keep the majority of our caseloads, along with basically our client documents in general. Our phones at our office is 10 years out of date. They don't even make parts for them anymore. We were recommended to get new ones, but we were denied by our financing department. Our storage for our virtual files and documents are not only limited, but nearly impossible to organize. If the technology wasn't so behind or limited, our workers wouldn't have to fight to do our jobs. We need help. We need to help our clients, the people who deserve justice, fairness, and dignity for all.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your testimony. It was mentioned earlier by Delegate Ivey. He was asking about the salaries for attorneys within OPD. And it's very easy for folks to think when we talk about OPD to just focus on attorneys, but as was rightly pointed out by the gentlelady's testimony, that the Office of the Public Defender also includes administrative staff, also includes social workers, case workers, investigators, etc. And so the question that he asked earlier was whether the salaries for attorneys in OPD were comparable with that of attorneys in neighboring jurisdictions. I think they mentioned some numbers in Fairfax, etc. I would be very curious to know where OPD stands on some of these other very important positions, right, from administrative to social work, case management, investigators. How do you all compare to other offices, public defenders' offices in the area as it relates to salary? You don't need to provide that information now, but would appreciate if you could furnish the committee with that, because that's certainly something that we need to consider, especially when we're talking about OPD's budget, because it's not just about the attorneys, but it is about all the important support staff that help those attorneys to be able to represent the indigent. So if you could furnish the committee with that information, I'd appreciate it. And thank you all so much for your testimony. Good to see you. I don't know what hat you're wearing today. President Flowers, Maryland, good to see you. However you're showing up today.
Thank you, Delegate Acevedo. Really good point. And again, thank you all for being here. Definitely appreciate your advocacy, the work that you do, and just being here. We appreciate hearing directly from the public. We get to sit here and hear from agencies all the time, but the people directly affected is really good for us to hear directly from you as well. So thank you all once again for being here. Appreciate you. All right, that will end the hearing for the Office of the Public Defender. We will now move to the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we'll begin with the analysis by Mr. Jacob Polikoff.
Keep the wheels turning. Bring a bottle of water. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Office of Administrative Hearings was established to provide an unbiased and objective forum for contested cases involving state agencies. As such, it is an independent unit of the executive branch and is one of the largest central panel agencies in the country. Its cases originate from approximately 30 agencies that reimburse OAH based on the proportion of time that it spends on their cases. Additionally, homeowners who are subject to foreclosure may request mediation with an OAH mediator. The OAH budget increases by $783,263, or about 4.3%, to $18.9 million in fiscal 2024. OAH is funded almost exclusively with reimbursable funds. These funds come from the more than 30 state agencies served by OAH each year, and a funding matrix is utilized to ensure that agencies are fairly and proportionally charged for the services provided by the office and its judges. The budget for OAH is mostly allocated towards personnel, with Exhibit 1 on page 2 showing that 86% of the fiscal 2024 allowance is for regular salaries and contractual employee expenses. Rent and other fixed charges do occupy an additional 6% of the allowance. As depicted in Exhibit 2 on page 3, the fiscal 2024 allowance increases by a little over $783,000, or approximately 4.3%. The largest changes include increases to employee and retiree health insurance, the annualization of the November 2022 4.5% cost of living adjustment, and incremental salary increases. Other significant changes include a significant increase in non-DGS rent expenses and funding for court reporting services increasing. The office rent increases that I just mentioned, the fiscal 2024 allowance provides nearly $1.2 million for rent at locations not owned by the Department of General Services. The rental expense for the Hunt Valley facility increases by $123,485 in fiscal 2024, an increase in expenses of more than $10,000 per month. Despite savings from the closure of the Cumberland office in fiscal 2023, this still results in an increase in office rental expenses of 10.5%. The Office of Administrative Hearings should comment on the reasons for this increase in rent at the Hunt Valley office and if additional increases at this level are expected in coming years. Personnel data, seen on page 4, shows that as of December 31st, 2022, OAH had 7 positions vacant, which was 5.98%, and 3.2 vacancies above their expected turnover. However, the office does have 6 new administrative law judges who will have their first day of work 1 week from today, March 8th, filling 6 of the 7 vacant positions. OAH generally does attempt to fill at least 3 ALJ positions at once so as to minimize the costs and resources associated with the training process for new judges, which can take up to a year. On page 5, we have our first key observation, which discusses the Managing for Results evaluation. Each year, the office hears thousands of cases from more than 30 state agencies, and in fiscal 2022, OAH disposed of 28,219 cases. This did represent a small decrease of 4,704 cases from fiscal 2021. OAH has asserted that this drop is mostly due to a problem experienced by the Motor Vehicle Administration. MVA converted to a new database in September 2021, and data conversion issues with the new system caused delays in the transmission of some MVA cases over to OAH for 9 months. Exhibit 3 in the middle of page 5 displays changes over time in the number of cases disposed by OAH each year. And this is in thousands. We can see that in 2018, there were about 41,000 cases disposed. That did decrease during the pandemic, and in fiscal 2022 was at the previously mentioned 28,000 and change. This is not an uncommon phenomenon. Each year, OAH experiences some fluctuations in the number of cases it receives from agencies. However, the changes generally are not as drastic as the one experienced in fiscal 2022. A smaller example is seen in fiscal 2022 in the number of Department of Budget and Management personnel cases disposed, which increased from 415 in fiscal 2021 to 585 in fiscal 2022. Similarly, Maryland Department of Labor cases rose from 338 in fiscal 2021 to 396 in fiscal 2022. The majority of OAH's cases come from the Maryland Department of Health, the Department of Human Services, and the MVA, and data regarding the number of those cases disposed per year, along with all other cases disposed, may be found in Exhibit 4 in the middle of page 6. In fiscal 2022, all tracked case types, except for foreclosure cases, saw a decrease in average case processing time. This increased efficiency across most types of cases resulted in the average case processing time at OAH decreasing from 67 days in fiscal 2021 to 46 days in fiscal 2022. The cases with the most significant reductions in average case time were Department of Labor cases, which saw a 94-day reduction in the time from the date OAH received an appeal to the date of disposition. Exhibit 5 in the middle of page 7 shows a full breakdown of the changes in average case processing times. And for every abbreviation, there is the very helpful explanation of what that abbreviation is below the exhibit. According to the Office of Administrative Hearings, the increase in average case processing time for foreclosure cases in fiscal 2022 is due to the lingering effects of the federal moratoriums on foreclosure proceedings and evictions that were instituted during the COVID-19 pandemic. These moratoriums reduced the number of foreclosure cases filed and resulted in stays and extended case times for cases where mediation had already been requested with OAH. Exhibit 6 in the middle of page 8 illustrates the shift in foreclosure cases over time as the number of disposed foreclosure cases decreased from 2,296 in fiscal 2018 to 403 in fiscal 2022. Bless you. OAH should comment on if the number of foreclosure cases is expected to remain at this new lower level, or if the number of cases is expected to increase to pre-pandemic levels. OAH should also comment on if a significant increase in foreclosure cases would affect their ability to return to pre-pandemic average foreclosure case processing times. Finally, on page 9, we come to the recommended action, which is to concur with the governor's allowance. And as always, I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the analysts? Seeing none, thank you once again for a very thorough analysis. We will now turn to the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we'll begin with Chief Administrative Law Judge Pak. If you want to introduce your panel as well, please introduce them or have them introduce themselves. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Chief Administrative Law Judge Chung Pak of the Office of Administrative Hearings. This is my first in-person budget hearing, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Also with me is our OAH's Director of Finance and Administration, Denera Harbel, next to me, and Director of Quality Assurance, Administrative Law Judge Latonia Dargan, next to me, and Director of Operations, Administrative Law Judge John Radick. And two behind me on the back seat are our Deputy Director of Operations, Saida Hamptonell, and our Deputy Director of Quality Assurance, Emily Danaker. They constitute my management team at OAH. It is pleasure to see you again, Chairman Bridges, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Delegate McComas, and Delegate Acevedo, and Delegate Chang. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to the budget analysis. I would also like to thank OAH's new legislative analyst, Jacob Polycarp, for his thorough analysis. Jacob came to our Hunt Valley headquarters on November 29 to receive an overview of our agency and meet members of OAH's management staff. I appreciate the time that he took to learn about our agency and the important work that we do. OAH's entire workforce has been extremely agile and forward-thinking in the past 2 years during this period of disruption and uncertainty. And I am proud to report that there is no backlog of cases awaiting hearing at OAH because of OAH's ability to pivot to remote hearings during the pandemic. OAH remains vigilant of its statutorily defined role to provide flexible due process to the citizens of Maryland and has worked tirelessly to provide fair and impartial hearings to the people of Maryland who are affected by actions of many Maryland state agencies in a safe, efficient, and timely manner. Accessibility and efficiency of OAH will remain strong as it continues to ensure diligent due process for all Marylanders. OAH will continue to embrace improved technology and appreciates the funding for the much-needed e-filing system so that it can further enhance technology and improve accessibility to the public. OAH concurs with the governor's allowance. I believe you all have OAH's pre-filed testimony. I and members of my management team are here and happy to answer any questions committee members might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Judge Pak. Always good to see you. Welcome to your team. Appreciate the work that the Office of Administrative Hearings do on behalf of the people of this state. Just wanted to make sure that as far as resources, because you all do certainly important work in terms of resources. I know you agree with the governor's allowance, but as far as location and space, like where you all are situated, does that building accommodate not just your personnel, but the is it suitable, I guess, for the work that you all will be doing in the coming years, or are you all looking at another site, et cetera? I know it was brought up about the leasing, et cetera, and whatnot. So just curious about that.
A couple of years ago, OAH we negotiated 10-year contract with the owner, and the footage available is more than sufficient to carry out our important work at this time.
Okay.
We are continuing to monitor, obviously, the space to ensure that the tax dollars of Marylanders are well spent and provide adequate space and accommodation to people with disabilities as well as those who need access to the justice.
Appreciate that. It's just the only question that I have. Just feel free to reach out again. Appreciate the work of your office. Recognize the important work that you all do, and you know, we're just here to make sure that you all have what you all need. So thank you so much, and it's good to see you, Judge Bach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Acevedo. Mr. Vice Chair, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Judge Bach, for being here. And also, this question relates to the gentleman to my right here, Delegate Acevedo. With regards to the Hunt Valley location, there is an increase by $123,000, $485, with regards to this fiscal year, and looks like the increase is more than $10,000 a month. Is there any more additional information to provide of why the significant increase, other than the renewal of the contract a couple of years ago?
Hi. This increase starts January of 2024. And when we were negotiating the 10-year contract, we were in the middle of a fiscal year. So I didn't have a chance to ask for the increase for the current lease agreement.
Okay, and how long has the OAH been at this Hunt Valley location? Approximately.
Approximately, I think early or middle of 1990s. So we've been at the same place. And soon after I was appointed in 2020, at the I think 6 months later, we had to renegotiate the contract for renew the 10-year lease. And we had obviously no place to go at that time, and it provided sufficient space for what we were doing. So,
and approximately how many square feet is this location, Hunt Valley?
53,041.
And then Judge Pack mentioned in his testimony that it's handicap accessible. Is it located on the first floor?
Yes.
And then what's the address of the location, if anybody knows?
11101 Gilroy Road, Hunt Valley, Maryland.
And with regards to negotiations of the lease contract, does OAH see any additional increases per month on the lease agreement?
It's less than 50 cents a month per square foot. That's stated in the testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions. Thank you very much, Judge Pack.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Delegate McComas.
I was just kind of curious. Do your ALJs work at the Bel Air MVA? Because in the old days,
You could move your microphone a little closer to you.
in other words, they would have hearings. They wouldn't be appeals, but they would have a hearing so that the individual didn't have to go down to Hunt Valley. I was wondering, do you still have that the person initially, if they want to, file, you have the evidentiary hearing. So do they allow that so that people don't have to go outside their county?
So prior to the pandemic, we did do hearings at the various MVA branch offices.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of the pandemic, we pivoted to doing those hearings on a remote basis via video conference, first over Google Meet and then over WebEx. And it turned out to be pretty efficient and effective for everyone involved because our ALJs weren't having necessarily to travel all around the state. The licensees and their attorneys didn't have to structure their entire day around traveling to an MVA location or coming to Hunt Valley. So pretty much since the height of the pandemic, we've been doing the MVA hearings remotely via video conference.
So do you intend to continue that?
I believe so for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
However, people can always request to do an in-person hearing if they want.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask is, would it be possible that you could kind of tell us which counties have the biggest business with your agency? Because it would be nice to know if, you know, the folks in Western Maryland, you did away with the Cumberland office. Maybe you don't have that many people that do that. And then because it has always been, you know, since we're in the new age of computers and Zooms and all that, there's still folks that don't do that. So how do you deal with someone that is kind of computer illiterate? They don't Zoom, they don't have a computer. How does that work for folks that, while you're continuing to Zoom these meetings?
As indicated earlier, in terms of the MVA, our virtual hearing has become very popular among all the stakeholders involved. But in terms of, our organization is very flexible. We allow in-person hearings if they request it. And if, for example, even though we've gotten rid of Cumberland office, if the cases require us to go to Cumberland area, our AALJ will be traveling there to do in-person cases. So depending on the cases involved, certain cases are heard at Hunt Valley. We have 19 hearing rooms at Hunt Valley to handle certain types of cases there. Certain other types required by the statute to make sure that the hearings are done conveniently so that the stakeholders or parties involved.
Well, let me ask you this. I know I was at an ALJ hearing in Hagerstown, and it was in one of the institutions. And then the question is, I know that probably you do a significant amount of work within Perkins, and you know people wanting to get out of Dodge, and so I would assume that those video now, or are they do those two institutions, the hospitals as well as the prison system, do they have the video conferencing with your office, or do the attorneys have to show up at those different locations?
John can probably explain a little bit better.
Sure. So the hearings that formerly were conducted in hospitals are now conducted by video, by WebEx. For the correctional facilities, those are done by a bridge because that's the preference of the Department of Public Safety and Correction. We offered them the opportunity to transition to WebEx, and for a short time, we did transition to WebEx. It wasn't working because they wanted a separate computer for both the correctional institution presenter as well as the inmate. That didn't work for them. So we went back to using their bridge, their Polycom bridge. But we are still discussing whether we can transition to WebEx again, video conference.
But in other words, there's still video with that bridge system. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate McCombs. Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate you and all the work that you do. Okay. That will end the hearing for the Office of Administrative Hearings. We will now turn to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Division of Pretrial Detention and Services. We'll begin with the analysis by Jacob Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today we'll be going over the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services within the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. DPDS for pretrial detention. This is one of the more unique functions of the department. This is the operation of the local jail system in Baltimore City. This is the only local jail system in Maryland that is operated by the state, and all of these facilities are co-located in the same pretrial complex currently. The overall fiscal 2024 allowance is $285 million, which is about a $10 million increase over the working appropriation. Most of that is coming from overtime at about $7 million of an increase. And I'll be going into the overtime issue in just a second. But to begin with the performance evaluation, starting with Exhibit 1, shows the number of arrestees that are processed at central booking, as well as the number that are committed to pretrial detention. The overall trend has been of decline over the past decade, but that picked up during the pandemic, and there was a 10% decline again in fiscal 2022 for the number of arrestees processed. There was actually a slight 1% increase in the number that were committed to pretrial detention. And this represents the trend that has been ongoing of fewer cases coming to the department or to this division, but more acute cases that are more likely to be committed. In Exhibit 2, this shows the average daily population of the facilities in Baltimore City. I will point out that these are not only detainees, but this also does include some sentenced offenders. Mostly these are sentenced offenders with less than a year and a half from Baltimore City. This is a local function, but because the state has taken over responsibility for that, these sentenced offenders are also included in the population. Now, one of the more important performance measures that I'd like to talk about today is assaults. And Exhibit 3 shows the number of offender-on-offender assaults in Baltimore City facilities for the past 10 years. There was a large peak in 2017, and previously that was the peak for assaults. But now in 2022, we've reached a new peak for DPDS. Overall, there was about a doubling of the assaults in these facilities, and they more than doubled in BC BIC, or central booking. Assaults on staff also increased for those facilities by 45%, and at BC BIC, assaults on staff increased from 45 in 2021 to 88 in 2022, so nearly doubling. This is an ongoing issue that is related to the large vacancy rate for the department and for this division in particular. There is a large number of inmates and offenders that come through this system compared to the prison system, where people come in and they typically stay for 5 to 10 years or even longer. Whereas in this system, they're coming in rapidly and leaving rapidly. This has made these facilities more dangerous in the past in terms of assaults, both for staff and for inmates. But it is concerning and it is alarming to see the doubling over the past year and this return to unsustainably high assault rates. Moving on to the pretrial release program. So Exhibit 4 shows the number of cases that PRSP has received from the courts. To remind you, this is also a local function that the state has taken on for Baltimore City, and it involves supervising as well as performing pretrial investigations of those who have been placed on bail and on pretrial release. Exhibit 5 shows the performance measures for PRSP, specifically those that failed to appear to their court case. And PRSP has, for many years, met these goals. That's the same case in 2022, although there was a slight uptick as courts reopened and there's more freedom of movement for their supervisees. Now I'd like to move on to the budget, and beginning on page 9, there is a description of actual spending in fiscal 2022 and how that affects fiscal 2023. So overtime spending was higher in fiscal 2022 than they anticipated by almost $5 million. And that trend is occurring again in fiscal 2023. The working appropriation is lower than the allowance and it's lower than the actuals, so we are expecting that some amount of vacancy savings that would be generated in 2023 would need to be transferred for overtime based on their current expenditures. We're asking the department to comment on the overall amount of vacancy savings that they saw in fiscal 2022, what they used those funds for, and any amount of excess savings that might be going towards overtime in 2023. Moving to Exhibit 7, this is the Where It Goes chart, and it breaks down the $9.8 million budget increase. That first item in the chart is overtime earnings, and that increases by about $7.1 million. And this is one of the larger increases we've seen in overtime. For the department, it is at the highest rate it's been at in budgetary history. And the number of hours worked is increasing for officers, as I'll be showing in a minute. Some other increases that are notable are is the annualization of the 4.5% COLA, adding $1.7 million, as well as $1.4 million being added for critical maintenance funding. Moving to the personnel data section, which begins on page 12. The overall vacancies did increase this year from 12.8% last year to 14.7% now. This is higher than budgeted, but this division does have a fairly high budgeted turnover rate, so it's only about 1 percentage point higher than what's budgeted. Exhibit 8 breaks down where these vacancies occur in the department based on classification, or in this division based on classification. As you can see, the largest percentage of vacancies are in maintenance staff, and with the critical maintenance funding increase, it's important that these staff be filled so that they can accomplish the goals and minimize any of those dangers that occur from not completing these critical projects. Similarly to other parts of the department, there is high vacancies among psychologists, counselors, and social workers, as well as dietary staff, office and fiscal staff. And among all of their administrative employees, there are elevated vacancies higher than we would want to see. The first issue today that I have alluded to before is overtime, and Exhibit 9 shows the number of overtime hours that have been worked each pay period for CO levels 1 and 2, these are the ones that are mainly using overtime, the ones that are authorized to use it. Although the department has noted that other classifications have been opened up to using overtime for these facilities, including CO sergeants, CO lieutenants. Overtime by facility is shown in Exhibit 10 for this division. You can see that most of those costs are occurring in BC-BIC, as well as MTC and MRDCC, which are the larger detention centers. But correctional officers in each of these facilities are experiencing at least 20 hours per week. In some cases, officers can volunteer for more or be drafted for more. But for the most part, we're averaging about 20 hours per week in additional hours worked for these employees. It's one of the contributors to the high assault rates. There are tired employees that are less likely to pick up on dangerous situations, and they may even, in cases, contribute to the danger by being negligent or in having a less clear head than they would need to be in that situation. There is a fundamental need to reduce the amount of overtime that these officers are working, not just because it's a cost issue, but because it is a safety issue. DLS is highly concerned, and we are requesting that budget bill language be added, restricting funding, pending a report on their overtime hours and assaults. The information would include a breakdown by facility, going back as far as July 2015, and we're asking them to analyze information they have available to determine patterns in assaults that may be influenced by overtime use or other factors, as well as the actions they're taking to reduce their overtime, assessing the impacts of those actions, as well as updating the committees on the investigation from the U.S. Department of Labor into errors for paying overtime. To remind the committee, this was the U.S. Department of Labor investigated and found that at least $30 million in the past 2 years for CO overtime was underprovided to those officers. It was undercounted by the department, and this is ongoing, but we're expecting that more amounts might be needed to be paid. Moving to the second issue today, this is regarding the Hogan v. Duval settlement agreement, or excuse me, the Duval v. Hogan settlement agreement. To provide a background, this was an American Civil Liberties Union class action lawsuit that was filed on behalf of Jerome Duval, as well as other Baltimore City detention detainees regarding poor conditions at that former detention center. The department has demolished that former center, and in doing so, and in transferring the inmates into other facilities, they have complied with 3 of the conditions for the physical plant conditions. However, there are medical and mental health provisions that the department has not been in compliance with. This has been an ongoing effort, and in fiscal 2023, there was $750,000 authorized to procure attorneys and experts to help the department reach compliance on an accelerated timeline. Exhibit 11 shows the upgraded areas of compliance since this time, since we have updated you last year. These have occurred in a couple of different areas, but they have improved mental health provisions more than the other areas. Exhibit 12 shows, however, that one more area compared to those that were upgraded was actually downgraded. Most of these are regarding the fact that a procurement and an ongoing IT project to provide a new electronic patient health record has been delayed, and actually the ongoing work from that vendor was terminated. So this puts the department at least 3 years behind on accomplishing that project and on meeting these Duval provisions. Some of those provisions that the department also is struggling to comply with are Americans with Disabilities Act. There is an ongoing ADA compliance study that is seeking to determine how many construction projects would be needed to bring the department fully up to ADA compliance. We are expecting that would add to their extensive backlog of critical maintenance projects, which are at $80 million currently. Some of the projects that are aimed at eliminating or at bringing the department into compliance with these Duval provisions are delayed. I already mentioned that the electronic patient health record procurement was canceled. The contract was canceled, and that is being re-procured. There is also in the works the Therapeutic Treatment Center for Baltimore City, which is a capital project, and it's actually, among both phases, the most expensive capital project the state has ever considered. That would be replacing the Baltimore City Jail, and it would be providing about a 1,400 bed facility, which in essence would be a treatment-focused hospital in a maximum security setting. Delays have pushed that design back at least 6 months, and cost estimates have increased $50 million in the past year, and we're expecting that further delays will increase costs further, as well as pushing back the compliance for Duval provisions into the future. Since this is important, this is a legal requirement to comply with these provisions. We're asking DPSCS to comment on the actions that they've taken, particularly with regard to the legal consultants hired, and any other changes that would be necessary to ensure that staff follow standards of compliance and that the level of compliance does not fluctuate year after year like we are seeing. To summarize, going to the recommended actions on page 21, there was only one action, which I described in the issue, restricting $300,000 to receive a report on overtime and assaults. There is also a JCR appendix showing a description of the report submitted this past year, as well as an appendix showing the current compliance status of each Duval v. Hogan provision. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. Let me just ask a quick question. When it came to the assaults, maybe I missed it. I know we have the offender-on-offender assaults. Do we also have the assaults on staff?
Yeah, so I didn't graph that, but for DPDS, they increased by about 45%. For the department as a whole, it was less of an increase, so this is more of a pretrial specific for assaults on staff.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for the analyst? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your analysis. Definitely appreciate it. We'll now bring up the secretary, Carolyn Scruggs, and please bring up your staff and have them introduce themselves as well. Thanks again for being here. You're here with us every week.
I know. Good afternoon again, Chair Bridges and committee members. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be in front of you again. With me today is Christina Lentz, my Acting Deputy Secretary of Administration, Annie Harvey, Acting Deputy Secretary of Operations, Dion Randolph, Commissioner for Pretrial Detention and Services, and Angelina Granero on the end. She is our data analyst specialist. We appreciate again, Mr. Cash, your thorough response, and thank the Department of Legislative Services for your presentation. The analysis contains 2 issues for us to comment on and 1 recommendation. First, the department was asked to identify the overall amount of vacancy savings in fiscal year 2022 that were used to fund other purposes and the amount of excess vacancy savings generated so far in 2023. The fiscal year 2022 vacancy saving was $24.6 million for all funds, of which the general fund vacancy saving was $10.8 million. Though it is difficult to identify the specific deficits the vacancy savings covered due to our complex accounting structure, the expenditure categories that had the largest deficits were our inmate food, utilities, and telecommunications. A breakdown of the savings is provided within my written testimony. At this time, it is too soon to identify the fiscal year 2023 savings, given there are 8 remaining pay periods in the fiscal year, and the department has not received information related to its share of the pending FY 2023 statewide budget amendments. I can further inform you that the department continues to experience vacancy rates between 11 and 16% in each facility, despite significant efforts to fill those vacancies. To help address rates, the department increased entry-level salaries, specifically for the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services. Hard-to-fill positions included correctional dietary officer, correctional supply officer, correctional maintenance officers. The entry-level salaries for these positions were increased in fiscal year 2022 in an effort to be more competitive with recruitment. To other hard-to-fill positions included pretrial investigators and commitment record specialists, and these entry-level salaries were also increased. During the last quarter of 2022, the department more than doubled its administrative and correctional hiring compared to prior quarters. As I stated in previous hearings, the department continues with efforts to recruit and retain our staff, and these efforts will reduce vacancy savings in the future. The second issue the department was asked to comment on is specific to the status of Duvall versus Hogan, the settlement agreement. The litigation was initiated in the 1960s, prior to the state assuming control of the Baltimore pretrial facilities, and it has been in existence for multiple decades. Since this time, the department has demolished the original facility impacted by this population, the Baltimore City Detention Center. However, as the pretrial population has expanded, other facilities were included within this lawsuit. I am incredibly proud of everything Commissioner Randolph and her team are doing to come into compliance with this settlement agreement. The department has fully satisfied 16 of the 26 original conditions of the agreement. We continue to work with the court monitors and healthcare providers to come into compliance with the remaining provisions. There are 2 key areas the department is working to improve in order to reach full compliance: implementation of an electronic health records system and modification of space to improve clinical care. Currently, the department utilizes a hybrid electronic and paper medical record system. Both the medical and mental health monitors are of the opinion that the department cannot be fully compliant with the settlement agreement without a fully automated electronic health record system. As I shared in previous testimony, the department is actively working with NextGen to enhance the legacy application to meet the legal requirements as set forth in Duval versus Hogan, the consent decree, and the timeline is to be completed in fiscal year 2024. The department also continues to plan for the new therapeutic treatment center, which will adequately provide space and treatment for incarcerated individuals. Regarding the recommendations, the department concurs with the recommendations, but must note that the breakdown of correctional officer overtime hours and expenditures paid per facility per pay period from July 2015 to July 2023 is not possible. The department did not begin to track this data until October 25th of 2016, when we were converted into Workday. That concludes my testimony. I would like to, if I can, have Angelina explain to you how we actually calculate our assaults, because I do believe it's a little different than what Mr. Cash explained to you, and we calculate it based on our management for results. So I did want her to clear that up for you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'd like to speak first to the question that was raised by Chair Bridges, which is that we do report both inmate on inmate and inmate on staff assaults in order to enable multi-year comparative measurement, which is what we use the MFR for. We provide these rates normalized according to 180p, which allows for easier direct comparison between populations that vary in size from year to year. And that change in size of population is seen most keenly within the DPDS population. The other thing that I'll just preemptively offer as well is that there are a number of more refined measures that better express qualitative measures of our population than what is typically looked at when you are just examining average daily population. One of the lasting changes that we've seen within the pretrial population is that even after courts have reopened, our length of stay in pretrial detention is still significantly impacted and weighted by the cessation of court operations during the pandemic period. That means that while we may have fewer individuals now than we previously did before, in the past, they nevertheless have still spent more time waiting for trial than they previously have. And that does have some impact on not just acuity, but the opportunity for interpersonal conflicts with other individuals who are similarly held without bail. Currently, I believe our average retention, our length of stay for the DPDS system still remains upwards of 40 days longer than it was before the pretrial period. That's not necessarily the experience of individuals recently coming into our custody, but it is accounting for those individuals who waited over a year to have their trials held and may still be in our custody. I can certainly get into, if you wish later, discussions about how resumption of full movement within the facilities create opportunities for those individual conflicts, which is what Mr. Cash mentioned in his analysis, that we're not seeing the same trend necessarily within inmate and staff interactions. But one of the important markers of acuity that we maintain internally is the severity of those incidents, whether they involve significant harm to an individual that may require medical attention. And just as we are mindful of those changes when they happen to look at what causes them, the large marker of this past year has been that they are less serious interpersonal interactions that do not result in significant medical attention. So just to put that into the context when we're discussing this as a marker of facility safety.
Could you define what less serious may mean? It might just be punching somebody.
In the same way that there exists in the law a difference between aggravated assault and second-degree assault. They're both assault. One of them involves grievous bodily harm. One of them could be a bodily fluid exchange. And all of those are grouped in our less serious categories.
So you're saying if you take those less serious, put those less serious, at least take them out of the way that we normally calculate things, then we wouldn't really see that spike, or will we still see a spike?
Those less serious assaults account for 92% of the numbers that you're looking at. We report them all, as we always have, because any conflict that results certainly in bodily harm is important. It's important to track and it's important to address. But I would also note that what is not a component of our managing for results numbers is the number of interactions in which de-escalation techniques were used. We do have CIT teams trained. Our staff employ those in interactions. And I would say that a necessary component of managing safety within the facilities is also engaging in that de-escalation so that not as serious altercations don't become more serious retaliatory altercations.
Gotcha. Will you be able to provide the committee with the way that you broke that down
I
versus?
Certainly forward a copy of our normalized rates. That way you can very directly compare from one year to the next. There's certainly something that are available and that we can use in our reporting publicly, and all of those additional measures are things that we will include in our formal report, which we've accepted the recommendation for.
Yep. Thank you. Delegate McComas.
This question you might not be able to answer, but I was wondering, as far as FTAs, you have somebody that's incarcerated. Is there any linkage between, because we don't have bail bondsmen or anything, that you get feedback that people that stay in obviously show up for their court date, but people that are recogged, I guess maybe that's the judiciary, right? You don't keep track of failure to appear.
That's correct. The judiciary actually serves that warrant on that individual. We basically just process and house them. So that statistical data would be with judiciary.
I'm sorry, you speak so softly.
That information would be with the judiciary. We process the warrant for them, but they're the ones that issue the warrant for the FTA.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to know is, do you compare do you try to compare how other prison systems operate, like around the United States, and how you compare with them?
So I'm happy to say that Central Booking, which is the intake center, is accredited by the American Correctional Association, which allows us to be compared to other entities just like that around the country. So they are, and they just recently, over a year ago, had an audit where they met standard in every area by the American Correctional Association. So that is our comparison to best practices throughout the United States.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
Thank you. Just one last question. How often do you actually survey staff about how they feel about their own personal safety?
That's something that supervisors should be doing every day. That's why we have a roll call. That's why we have staff meetings. It's for those discussions. And then additionally, we talk to them about confrontational avoidance, and as Angelina spoke, just de-escalation and safety. And staff are not shy to tell you if they don't feel safe. They are very vocal and loud in doing that, and we take that highly. We act on it immediately.
Yeah, thanks. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and thank you for being here. Thanks for all that you do. We do have some public testimony. We do have two individuals for public testimony. We've got Jason Billingsley and Out for Justice. No? Going once, twice. We have no one here for public testimony. Thank you all once again. Definitely appreciate you being here. That will end the hearing for Division of Pretrial Detention and Services, and that'll end our hearing today. Members, we still have a vote to take. So let's go ahead and do the vote quickly. This is House Bill 498. It's Delegate Corman's bill. Just to remind you all, this bill requires the Board of Public Works for each of its meetings of the board held on or after October 1st, 2024, to allow members of the public to electronically submit comments on agenda items. The bill's public comment requirements also include any updates to the agenda of the board. The bill requires Board of Public Works to employ at least one more staff position than the number of positions authorized in fiscal 2023 to carry out the bill's provisions. There is an amendment to the bill. And the amendment is technical. It simply strikes October and substitutes July. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're not the vice chair.
You were speaking into existence. You were speaking into existence.
Yeah.
You said the right thing. But I'd like to move the amendment.
Is there any second? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any questions? Yep. I believe everybody's good with it. No one had any unfavorable testimony. Yep. So I think we're all good. All right. Any other questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move the amended bill.
All right. The bill has been amended and moved favorably. Is there a second? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The bill is passed. Thank you all very much. That will end our work for today.